Leanne Rodriguez is a dynamic leader in grant seeking, fundraising, and community initiatives, with an extensive track record of helping nonprofits achieve transformative growth and impact. She holds a Doctor of Business Administration from the Pontifical College or Catholic University of Puerto Rico, as well as an MBA, Master's in Translation, and Bachelor's in Modern Languages from the State University of Puerto Rico. Leanne has successfully secured multi-million-dollar funding for nonprofits and higher educational institutions, including unrestricted and restricted grants, and giving, major gifts, and capital campaign. Her strategic leadership has empowered organizations to expand their services, launch new programs, and strengthen operational sustainability. As the founder of Extendio, she works closely with nonprofits to secure vital resources, craft winning strategies, and build capacity for long-term success. Her accomplishments include leading the development of comprehensive grant policies and managing large-scale federal projects, such as a 7-figure National Science Foundation grant that earned her the White House Champion of Change Award in 2013. She has also driven transformative change in the public sector, designing interagency initiatives to support vulnerable populations. So as you can see, you're in really good hands. Leanne's dedication to nonprofit excellence and community impact empowers organizations to expand their reach, fulfill their missions, and create lasting change. Leanne, thank you for sharing your expertise with us this morning, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Would you like for me to use the microphone or does my voice carry? Good? Okay, good. So thank you so much for being here this morning, and thank you, Simone, for that wonderful introduction. I was able to chat with all of you fairly quickly while I was handing out some of the materials. So I just want to do a really quick round robin, just to have your name and what organization you represent so that we all see the great mix of different representation from the community organizations that we have here.
Great. I am Melanie Rose, and I am with Replay Outreach. I volunteered.
Sarah Boudreau. I'm also with Replay Outreach. I'm the admin director and a leadership development coach.
I'm Chianti Josie. I'm with United Community Center's 13th Ave Dream Center.
Akila Miller, and I'm with you. I'm Laura Eek, and I'm the president.
Scott Hockin, I'm with the SCF Foundation. I'm their scholarship specialist.
Elizabeth Kropnick, I'm the Director of Development for St. Stephen's.
Bianca Lawrence, I'm the director of the annual fund at St. Stephen's.
Beverly Burdett, I'm the executive director at Palmasola Botanical Park.
Kristen Mead, I'm the board president for Palmasola Botanical.
My name is Matthew McCormack, and I'm the Director of Development and Donor Relations with Resilient Retreat.
Pamela Burton, I'm the new grant writer with the Salvation Army.
Melinda Zarzicki Harris, executive director and founder at Bring On the Ministry.
Carolyn Orshak. I'm with the Anna Maria Island Historical Society. I'm the president of the board of directors.
Great.
Hi, Paul Johnson, founder of Service Dog Saving Lives.
Jacob Kinzel, board member for Take Stock and Children of Manatee County.
Michael Higley, Director of Operations, Take Stock Manatee.
Stephen Gafonte, founder, CEO of Rocket Phonics Foundation.
Lindsay Hartman with Hope Family Service, with violence nonprofit, and I am the director of development.
Sonia Brown, Manatee County Fiscal Analyst.
I'm Ann Miller with Community Harvest SRQ. We do food recovery. I'm a board member, but I'm the acting executive director.
Tiona Settles. I am the Community and Donor Engagement Coordinator for MCR Health.
Emily Karate. I'm with Manatee River Youth Sailing.
John Frontfilter, I'm the development specialist at Cat Depot.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Booth. I'm the Director of Donor Engagement at Seeds of Success, and I'm a TA at the University of Central Florida.
Nicole Mobley, Development Director at Samaritan Counseling Services of the Gulf Coast.
Tim Boyd, Director of Guardian Angels of Southwest Florida.
I'm Olivia Domingo. I'm the Executive Director of Friendly City Foundation.
Well, thank you all for being here. As you can see, wide range of organizations represented here today. And as Simone introduced me, I'm Leanne Rodriguez, the founder and principal of Extendio, soon to be rebranded to She Gets Grants. So I will be coming soon. That will be a new website talking about how you can find, write, and win grants for your nonprofit or organization, or maybe even for profits. So let's get the show on the road. We try to be strategic and put a bunch of packets on your table on the little corner so that as I spoke, you could just like open up to the different pages. Don't know how well that's going to work, but they're on the corner. So as I signal out to something, I'll make sure to let you know which piece of the packet we're looking at. So today, this is the menu. This is what we'll be covering today. It's all based on food. When I prepared this, I was very hungry, so I try to make it based on ingredients and try to make it relatable. And maybe some of you have the same food taste as I, so maybe some of the stuff will stick better if you can associate it with food or with cooking. So our main objective today is to talk about grant basics, definitions, categories, strategy. It's not all about having the skills to write the grant, it's having the strategy prior to make sure that you're successful and not spinning your wheels in the wrong areas. And then that's the appetizer. The entree would be identifying, qualifying funding opportunities that align with your organization, with your projects, proposal writing, budgeting, which is really important. And then our dessert will be reporting and stewardship. So once we get to the dessert, that means that we have secured that funding and what's next. So anybody have any questions on what we'll be covering today? No? All righty. So according to the IRS, this is what defines what a grant is. And what I highlighted in orange is it's funding that is granted to your organization for a particular project or a program or maybe even general operating support, but it's given to you without any expectation of repayment. So that's really important for people to know, especially I hear there's a fiscal person in the room. So the way that the reporting is done on your 990s, on your audited financial statements. There's a little sector there that talks about grants. It's really important that we all speak the same language when we're talking about grants. If it was a bridge loan, it wasn't a grant. If it was something that was granted to you and you didn't fulfill, or it was based on milestones and those things didn't happen, that's not considered, if you have to repay it, it's not a grant. So that's the main focus that I want to make sure that you leave here with, and that you have those conversations with whoever is managing the finances in your organization so that you're on the same page. Sometimes program people describe certain things one way, but the way it looks on the books is described another way. So have that conversation if that's not clear in your organization. And it's all about the accountability. So a grant is typically accompanied by accountability. You have to comply with something, and there are requirements. So there are different types of grants. They can be reimbursement grants, they can be fixed grants. So even if you don't complete the amount of money that you said you were going to spend on something, if it's a fixed grant, you're able to keep the money. They're not going to ask you to give it back. So there are different types of grants, but just make sure that you know that a grant, when it's given to you, when it's granted to you, there's always going to be some type of requirements and accountability that you have to comply with. So I'm assuming everybody here is signed up for Manatee Community Foundation's newsletter. Is that how you were able to sign? If you saw Veronica Thames' last newsletter, you might have read her very poignant article on the state of nonprofits and what's going on nationwide, federal-wide with the funding. And so she referred to the Urban Institute, and you'll see here that it says that 95% of the counties across our country out of the 95% counties, the nonprofits within that 95% of all counties across the country receive some type of government funding. So that's huge. And given what is going on currently, we're not going to go down Doom's Road, but it's just for us to be aware of what impact that might have. Veronica actually pointed out that in Manatee County, and I hear that a lot from what I heard from your introductions, a lot of you are based in Manatee County. That's how much money non-for-profits in Manatee County have received at government grants, $131 million. And so with the different changes, the shifts and everything that's going on, there's a great probability that 70% of the nonprofits in Manatee County might have some type of government funding cuts. Again, we're not going down Doom's Road. This is just for us to be aware that we have to look at our strategies and see what buckets we will be filling with our grant writing. Number one, to fill in the gap if that truly happens to your organization or organizations as a whole. And that's why we're here. We're going to figure out how we're going to tackle that in a way that's strategic, that has higher probability of winning the grants. And these resources, in addition to being subscribed to Manatee Community Foundation newsletter, there are many other foundations that we'll look at later, but you can sign up for their newsletters to know what's going on, what's the state of nonprofits currently. And I've listed for you two that are national, so they give a really good deep dive of what's happening nationally, the National Council of Nonprofits and the Florida Nonprofit Alliance. They are on the ground doing a lot of research. A lot of them are doing lawsuits and what have you to make sure that the nonprofits continue to receive the funding that they have already been granted, but that has been halted, and then the halt comes off and all that type of stuff. So we know what's going on, but this is where you can search or be aware of to see what the state of the grants world is looking like day to day or week to week. And I forgot to say, you can interrupt and ask any questions as we go along. We don't have to save anything for the end of the presentation. And so I'll go over this really quickly. I have prepared this, and I don't want to go too deep into it given the situation with the federal grants, but just know that there are different types of grants that the federal and the state governments have. So you have everything from formula grants, which is truly based on what the population, the number of people that live in a certain area, how much federal money gets assigned. You have discretionary project grants, so the federal agencies that continue to give out grants or that have that discretionary funding, they determine what the priorities are, and based on that, you align if any of your needs, projects, programs align with that, and that is on a competitive basis, so you submit grants to be able to get that funding. And then you have the block grants, and I was talking earlier with you, so the CDBG, those are grants that address community needs based on the priority that the county has determined. And I participated in Manatee County's public hearing in CDBG orientation a month ago, and it was really well attended. So there really is an opportunity for nonprofits and for just citizens to go and speak to the needs. And one of the things that came up was, how do we provide services? And I'm pointing, I forgot, what's your name again?
Steve.
Steve, I'm pointing to Steve because he says that he teaches children how to read. And this is the first time that most of their cohort does not speak English, and their tutors do not speak the language that the children speak. So in that CDBG meeting, that was an idea that came up, or that was a priority that came up. How do we make sure that individuals that don't speak English receive the service and have access to the services and everything that's provided? So these are just examples of what those categories look like for government and opportunities. If it's not a particular grant that your organization is applying directly for, there are other ways to get funding from the government once all the dust settles. There's contracts, there are cooperative agreements, there are technical assistance funds, which are really important if you need capacity building. It might not be in the form of a hard dollar, but they might be able to give you technology, training for your staff, volunteers, all of that type of stuff, as well as the fellowships and scholarships. And on the right-hand side, those are just examples of these type of funding from the government that are in place and that have impacted Florida.
Would a technical assistant be getting me an expert on how to teach kids that don't speak my language, read English?
That might be depending on the agency. If they have that type of opportunity, that might be. So, digging into the philanthropy grants. This is where most of us live, I'm assuming, right? Does anybody have or is relying heavily on government grants more than to your knowledge right now? Okay. And what's your name, Miss?
Kendra Simpkins.
Kendra. Okay. So outside of the government grants, this is where we'll be focusing most of our attention today, which are the philanthropy grants. And so I tried to use images that would help me remember how they all are distinguished. So if you look at private foundations, eggs in one basket, it's basically a set of people or an individual who controls how that funding gets allotted. And it's based on what they believe in, what their values are, what their beliefs are, what they're interested in seeing in the community. So that's one way of looking at how you might look at your strategies for the different buckets. The community foundations, such as Manatee Community Foundation. As you can see, I use an image that has different colors, fruits and vegetables. Community foundations work with donors, different and many donors who have different interests to make the community that we live in better, enhanced in some certain way. So when we look at a community foundation, we know that there are different opportunities depending on the different donors that the community foundation has been able to create a relationship with. And for the most part, they either create a DAF, a donor advised fund, they might have a grant writing cycle, or in other ways, it might be a philanthropic advisor from the community foundation that reaches out directly to your organization and says, we have a funder who's interested in the type of work that you do. And the reason they would reach out to you is because you're engaged with them, you're letting them know what you're doing and all of that. And then that might be an opportunity to write a grant specifically for that donor. Public charities, think of United Way. These are public charities that help for the benefit of the good, and sometimes they have government funding in that also. And then the corporate giving programs. So really important to know about the categories of the corporate giving programs is that some of them have a foundation with grant writing cycles, whereas they also might have their marketing money set aside, which is for their sponsorships or just trying, it's really, how do I explain this? It's not the grant cycle, it's more about giving to further their image while helping the community versus a foundation of a corporation works similarly to the private and the community foundations where it's a grant application and all of that. And we also have professional and trade associations. So how many of us are a member of Association of Fundraising Professionals in the room? Okay, so when I refer to this, if you're aware that they have scholarships, for example, they can pay for your part of your membership, or if you want to go to a conference that is for professional development, you can apply to that. It's smaller money, but it helps fill the gaps of your capacity building when you are part of an association that has some type of giving mechanism. Any questions or comments so far?
The last is for members only?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. It could be for members only. So the grant categories here, as you can see, this is just a comparison and a contrast of the different categories that we just discussed. And this is just to give you a sense of how regulated or how controlled they are by the IRS and how they make their decisions. So when it's a private foundation, that is highly, highly oversought by IRS. Again, anything that has tax implications is going to be heavily regulated by IRS. So that just gives you an idea of what your strategy is and how you might approach them. The corporate giving programs, since that's internal, that probably doesn't have as much as restrictions as all the others that you might be seeing. But where it says governance, you can see how you might have a foot in. So if you want to go after a professional association, in addition to it being on the website, you could probably say, oh, I know Leanne, she's a member, or she used to be a board member, or my executive director used to be the president. Can you tell me what's the best way for me to apply? Versus going to a private foundation, you might have a trustee, that's the gatekeeper. You might not be able to talk to the individual directly, but you can talk to the gatekeeper. So it's always good to know who you're going to create that relationship with to get the foot in the door before you even start the grant. Okay, so packets. First page, if you haven't already revealed your packets. We have a horizontal handout, which I apologize for it not being portrait, and it's just two ways of saying the same thing. This is really important. Kendra raised her hand. She said that her organization relies heavily on government grants. So on average, nationwide, 33% of nonprofits rely on some amount of government funding. That's just an average. If it's not true for your organization, it's fine. But just so you know, that's what the average is. So that means that when it comes to grants, the other 67% comes from philanthropy grants, the ones that we just described now. So that should give you a little bit of sense of where you should be placing your strategies, your time, and your effort onto what type of grants you can be going after. So on the page, on the packet that we have here, if you're familiar with what the percentage of your overall grant distribution looks like, can you just jot that down right now? And if you're not, write down the name of who you need to ask. And if you don't know who to ask, go to your 990. Look and your audited financial statements. Look at the portion that says how much you're receiving grants versus charitable donations and all the others. But that gives you the stepping stone to start setting your strategy, knowing those numbers. First exercise under your belt. There you go. So, and what's really important is that regarding, let me see, go back. I'm so sorry. I didn't mention that the good thing about the government grants is how many of us are always looking for money to be able to fund staff? See a lot of hands raised, right? How many of you know how difficult it is when you're writing a grant to a community foundation, a private foundation? What do they, for the most part, where do you hear back? I just want to hear what you hear back.
They want a new initiative.
They want a new initiative.
Bigger budget.
A bigger budget?
A bigger budget so that they would help with the staff, a larger budget.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
We're a small nonprofit, under 300,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, they ask for you to be above that number in order to recognize a staff person. So we're all currently volunteers.
And how many of you have heard you need 2 years of 990s and financial statements to show us that you're sustainable so that we can even invest? Any other thoughts that haven't been mentioned? So what was good about, and what is good about the government grants is they fund staff positions. Yes, there are loopholes, there's a lot of work entailed with it, but once you're able to secure that grant, they do fund staff positions. So that's one place where you can look at for staff if your programs, your projects align with the federal, state, or local government grants. Another thing is federal, state, and local governments honor indirect costs for the most part. So does everybody know what an indirect or facility administration operational cost is, overhead? So the government grants will cover overhead. And the good thing is if your organization has a F&A rate is what they call, that means you've negotiated that rate with the government. And there are two agencies that do that, HHS and EPA at the federal level. You use that rate for all of your federal grants. And if it's awarded, you are entitled to get that much of money back for your overhead. That's how the higher ed institutions do it. It's not that you're making money off the government. You are getting reimbursed for all of those, that overhead, the indirect costs that are not directly, solely, exclusively related to the project. How many of you are able to put your overhead and all the other grants that you write out to the foundations and all? No hands, right? What? Into how do you accomplish that?
Stock members that are spend a certain percentage of time in that program, we allocate that money as a program in the budget.
Are you able to put in a budget line that says 10% for overhead costs, just like flat?
Nothing. Yeah, usually it's more specific.
Yeah. So that's what I'm referring to. When it's government, it's just, all right, overhead, and I'll give you an example. Universities, big universities, UCF, USF, FSU, all of them, they have not one negotiated F&A rate, they have several. So if they have a Marine Center, they'll have an F&A rate for that. If for the whole campus, it's this rate. And then when they're writing their grants, they go, okay, what is this program for? Or the Marine Center, okay, what's her rate? Okay, 50%, 50%. That's it, no explanation. So it's just to give you a distinction. I'm not advocating, I'm just saying for you to understand the differences.
For those that don't have a negotiated rate, do you know what the standard rate is?
10%.
7%.
10%. So those are the differences. And staffing, as we said, is challenging. Government is restricted. They are not going to fund you just for operational support. No. So that's where the philanthropy comes in. And we still know that unrestricted can be a little bit challenging. So within the philanthropy grants alone, we can see here that the private foundations and community foundations and a little bit of the public charities, those three together make up 90% nationwide of where the money comes from for the nonprofits when you're writing grants. 10% comes from the corporate giving and from the professional associations that we were referring to. So again, this gives you awareness of where to spend wisely your time, your effort, and your resources when you're writing your grants. When you're putting together your grant schedule, you want to make sure that you have a heavier mix on the private community foundations and not spend all of your time going after the corporate money. Time and time again, when the giving, what is it, the giving? No, I'm sorry, no, the giving report. I'm blanking on the true title of it. When it comes around each spring, more or less, or it becomes published in the summertime, it's usually the same pie, right? 78 to 80% of giving comes from individuals, 8 to 10% comes from corporations. That doesn't change much. And then the bequests, which are individuals, they're just not among the living anymore. That's where most of the money from philanthropy comes from. So when you're creating your strategy, your schedule for the grants, just know that you have to have a really good mix of the private and community foundations and family foundations in there in order to have great probability or a better probability of getting the grant through the door.
Wait,
Yes.
you're saying that we should apply to multiple places for the same grant?
Oh, yes.
Well, two of them give us a grant for the same.
Thank you for that question. So in the packet, let me see. You know what? We'll get to that in a minute. Sorry, Steve. I'll get to that in a minute. But. Okay, so I'm gonna go over this one because that one you have in your packet, and I guess I put that out of order. My apologies. So to answer, yes, I am gonna answer your question now, Steve. So when you're looking for your funding opportunities, first of all, we've talked a little bit about strategy, where to look, what government funds versus what philanthropy funds, what are the challenges in both, and what are the opportunities in both, but also knowing what your program is. And that's where I would like you to pick up your packet now, the one that says grant writing. Here we go. This is where I want it. That we're going to discuss now. Before we get to answering Steve's question, how many of you fundraise for more than one program in your organization? Okay. How many of you have a case for support, a white paper, a project description for each and every one of those programs or projects? So if you have that, that's something that you should have every time you start your fiscal year. Does everybody know what their fiscal year is? Okay. All right, so great. So every time you have that approved budget in your organization, which isn't approved by you, it's approved by your board and by your executive director, hands it down. Hopefully you've worked on it to be able to feed into what that budget looks like, to be able to run the programs and the projects. You should have for each one of your programs and your projects, what the approved budget for that is. And once you know how much budget you need for that program, Steve, when you start identifying all of the funding opportunities and how much you have to raise for that, you're going to have a good sense of how many grants you need to write for that one particular program or project. If you feel confident, and again, each one knows your organization best, if you have a great relationship with a particular foundation who is happy to fund you year after year after year and cover 100% the cost, you're in a great place. How many of you have that situation right now? Right? So if you don't, you need to be able to establish, where can I get this funding from? What are the opportunities out there for me? And you make a list, spreadsheet, however you make your list, best is spreadsheet, and you're able to write down. And then we're going to get into how you identify, but you're going to write down, out of all of these organizations, this one allows for 10,000. The max that I can ask this one for is 5,000. And you make your list. If your program costs $150,000, you have to ensure that you have a list of different grant opportunities that you can go after that could at least meet the $150,000. Because how many get 100% of all the grants awarded that you write? Right? So if you've only accounted for the minimum amount that you need, chances are you probably won't meet that goal, because no matter how many grants you write, not 100% of them are going to be awarded to you. So that's really important. And what's really important also, and we'll get to that, is funders want to know, many funders want to know, who else is investing in your project, or am I the only one? And then you're able to say, we have so many grants in our pipeline that have been submitted, that are pending notification if we're getting the money or not, and that have already been granted. Depending on your organization or depending on who the funder is, you don't have to give out the names. You could just categorize them and say, Foundation 1, Foundation 2, Foundation 3, if it's a personal or a family foundation, I should say, that prefers to be anonymous. But if it's a community foundation, somebody with great reputation, somebody who's, if it's a government grant, you definitely want to put that name so that that funder knows, oh, so-and-so is invested in this project. So that gives them a little bit more trust and credibility to your organization. So did I answer your question, Steve?
Okay, so let's get slightly more practical.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I go to Impact 100 and ask for a $100,000 grant
Mm-hmm.
to figure out how to tutor Hispanics and not trusting that they will actually perform. I go to 2 or 3 other grant writing people, grant giving foundations, and pitch the same grant. Am I, if by any miracle I get both grants, what do? Do I tell them, well, I only need half your money because you both accepted me, or what?
So that's a great question. And when you have your list and you've met the bare minimum, let's say you're saying Impact 100, which is a grant over 2 years, you're not going to get it in 1 year. So when you write your grant, let's say you're putting in 50,000, it's 50,000 each year, right? So when you're writing your grants to the other organizations, you're already discounting that 50,000 for year 1 and year 2. And that's, you have to play the strategic game so that you don't put yourself in that position of having to say no. And if you're in the position to be able to talk with a liaison at that funding organization, it's a great question to ask. I'm never scared to pick up the phone. I always read through all the guidelines. I have a filter in my brain. I'm sure each and every one of you has a filter. I might interpret things differently. I always pick up the phone and call and say, I read your website. I read the guidelines. This is what I'm understanding. Am I correct? And 99% of the times, yes, but there's always that chance that they'll say, oh, but this, and this. And so it gives you a chance to explain your situation to them and be transparent, because that's really important. So does that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Discount the grant and pray that both come through.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to, you have the document in front of you. So these are the common areas that most grants are going to ask for. It's not exhaustive. There's always going to be a question that isn't here that you'll have to dig in a little bit more, talk to your peers, your colleagues, the program manager, whoever's in charge of the project. But they're always going to ask, what's the problem? What is the need? And so you have a paper in front of you. We only have so many minutes, so we're not going to leave here with a fully written grant. Right now, think of the priority project or program you came in mind today that you wanted to leave with some nuggets. What is the problem, the need that you want to address with your proposal writing or with your grant, with your program, your project? So just write, if you don't, doesn't have to be a full sentence. Maybe it's hunger, feeding the hungry, or whatever it is, but write it down. Just write it down. What comes to mind? What's the most important need you feel that you want to address in writing that grant proposal? That will be expanded. How many of you love those applications that says 500 characters, including spaces? So at least you have a starting point, have that idea. And for some applications, they'll let you expand for pages on and on and on, like the federal grants. And for some of the online applications, it's 500 spaces, including characters. So just be clear on what the problem is. Solution. What's your solution? What are you proposing? Is it, I'm teaching children who do not speak Spanish how to read? What's the solution to that? Over here, what would your solution be? To any problem that you're trying to address right now, to the problem you said you were trying to address?
We have a 9-week leadership development training program. We implement within the alternative schools. We brought Bradenton Bay High School to Manatee County. It opened this school year. But we go when we meet with kids and we teach them basic leadership development skills to help try to keep them out of the system, out of detention centers, give them tools to build a better future for themselves because they come from really hard places.
So what I'm hearing is leadership skills for children in high school, for kids in high school, Some of them might be at-risk youth.
They are,
All of them, 100% is at-risk youth. Does anybody else know of organizations that do something similar to that? Leadership skills? Okay, what would make, we have two hands raised behind you. So you would think of what makes us unique? Why is my solution unique? Is it because it's a targeted area? Is it because the model you are using is different from what other people are doing? Is it because you put them on track to something different that the other organizations? You have to be able to say what makes you unique. Especially, and this is a great thing that I'm going to say, our community is so amazing. Manatee, Sarasota counties. The community foundations are so amazing. The donors, their grant cycles, their generosity, you know what? They all talk to each other. So if you are asking Manatee Community Foundation for something, for your leadership, they probably know the two people behind you who raised their hand. Oh, I know who does that too. Let me talk with so-and-so because I know they got funding from them. And they're gonna try to figure out if it's worth investing or not if you haven't described what makes you unique. So it's a good thing that they talk to each other because many of them will say, we need more information, can you expand? But if they don't do that and they figure it out on their own because you haven't told them what makes you unique, you've missed out on a great opportunity. Yeah, and I'm not picking on you, I'm just saying. So, how are you going to deliver? And we don't have time to write the full proposal, but what's the how? So you just said you go into the high school. Anybody want to give an example of how they do their program to benefit the grant that they want to accomplish? Steve?
Sure, well, we get volunteers, often from churches, and we connect with the principal, the school that has a low reading rate, which is easy to find on it, and offer to tutor their kids in after school.
So he recruits volunteers. They figure out which schools or what population is below the reading level or needs a lot of help. And then you go to the schools?
Yeah.
Okay, then you go to the schools. 3 steps. Anybody else have something quick of how to describe how they do their programming? Do you want to share what Resilient Retreat does for the program you have in mind?
Yeah, so I just did a very general post-hurricane mental health services related to the mind, the body, and the spirit. And how that's done are different day programs, overnight programs, individual programs, and our how is just connecting with different agencies and institutions within the community to spread the word of the services that are being offered at no cost, and then through that word of mouth, hoping that individuals either connect in person or virtually to the services.
So again, how you do it. And then the how might be part of what makes you unique. Or the population itself. So really important also is the who. Audience and key staff. Really, really important. Audience. How many of you are familiar with the Community Foundation of Sarasota County's Community Indicator Dashboard? Okay, they came here and they presented on that. So hooray, you're able to go in and get all of the statistics from all of the different government resources, the census, the ALICE reporting, all of that information is already up and running for free for you to access. If you need data to substantiate who your target audience is, you can go to the Community Foundation of Sarasota County's website, go under Community Indicator Dashboard, and again, you can spend hours and hours just drilling down and finding all this yummy data that will help you make the case for you regarding your target audience, why this particular population needs the solution that you are proposing, that your solution, your unique solution. So that's one of the areas where you can find that data. Also, be sure to look inwards. Hopefully your organization is maintaining information on the participants, the clients, however you define or call them. And you're able to share stories on that and pull from your internal surveys, your internal data of how you've been able to do the work that you do with that specific population. So, do I have a space in there for the who? All right, so just write down really quickly. Just jot it down. Again, it's just for you to have a starting point. And if you're not sure, if you have all the data you need, write down who in your organization you're going to ask for that data. Also, key staff. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering if you could answer this very quickly, like pros and cons, maybe around co-applying for a grant with another agency. So say if there's a project and you don't have the internal capacity to do it fully yourself, but there's another agency in town that does similar work, and then kind of co-applying to a foundation, is that frowned upon, or are there benefits
No,
to it?
it's all the contrary. It's so encouraged. It's very encouraged because number one, nobody likes to see their money wasted. If they're investing in you and you've been able to say, we're partnering with so-and-so because they can do this, we're going to do this part, they know that their money is going to be well invested. I'm so glad that you asked that question because collaboration, partnerships, all of that is really important. And you might have to choose which organization is the lead organization. You just have to describe why. But it's really well encouraged, especially in our communities. All of these foundations, they love to know that you're working with others. They just love to know that. Okay, so yes.
We're in a unique position because I don't get to know my final audience.
Okay.
Okay, when we bring fresh food from the fields, we're distributing to pantries and organizations that then do the food distribution. So I don't have that end number. Should I list the organizations that we distribute to as our partners?
Definitely. Yeah, I would definitely list the partners and then say what's the impact those partners have. So if one partner gives out to a particular community that has 100,000, just making numbers up, 100,000 residents, you're able to say, we partner with 13 food pantries who in a total serve $500,000 families, blah, 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 blah. So you're able to quantify that. It's really important, yeah. And then key staff also. So don't forget, and I brought the cards today. I'm going to digress really quickly. How many are familiar with the Gulf Coast Community Foundation? How many are familiar with the campaign they have going on, You Matter? So, cards for each and every one of you, because you all matter. Don't forget that your key staff is important also. When you're describing the how, who is going to be implementing it? What are their credentials? What is their expertise? Doesn't have to be a resume, 2 or 3 sentences. You all matter. Your staff matters. They have the expertise. They're the ones who get the things done. So you need to make sure that you're able to put that forward and say how that plays into your uniqueness, to your credibility, your sustainability, and to making sure that the outcomes you're looking to have will be accomplished. I just digressed there for a minute, but that's important. It has a little, oh yeah, I gave you one. It has a QR code, so you're able to pass it forward, log on to their page, take a picture of yourself or somebody else, an act of kindness. I think we can all use an act of kindness every so often, right? There you go. Did I miss anybody back there? Did I miss you? So really important also, timelines. Really important for you to let people know, your funders know. I wish I was skinnier, I could fit through it.
Nobody can fit.
Did I give you one? Your timelines. Make sure that when you're writing, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the goals. See, that's what I get for Zyber. So your goals. Has everybody heard of SMART goals, SMART planning? Does everybody know what SMART stands for?
Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound.
There you go. SMART goals. Were you going to say something, Liz? So those are the goals. You know the who, the audience, the key staff, the how, all of that. Timeline, time bound, milestones. Make sure that's really clear. And I asked earlier if everyone knew what their fiscal year is. That's really, really important to know. You know why? Because not all of the foundations, not all of the funders have the same fiscal year as you do.
I have a question on that. On certain grants, I've noticed, they don't specify whether or not they're talking about our fiscal year versus their fiscal year versus the calendar year. Sometimes it's hard to figure out numbers.
Do you
when
have
they're
a
asking.
specific
Does
question
make
that you're
sense?
thinking?
Well, like, how do you tell when they're asking you for results? Like, bracket of.
It would be the project period. So
Okay.
that's why it's really important. Thank you for asking that. That's why it's really important. For the most part, and this is just average, you know, it doesn't, some might be a little bit different. For the most part, corporations have a calendar fiscal year. So if a corporation foundation, if that were the case, and they gave you funding, you would report back on what you did in that project year that they gave it to you. So if they gave you money January 2025, you would report everything for the whole year of 2025 back to them. Community foundations, some of them have different calendar years. I think Gulf Coast Community Foundation starts in July or June. I'm not sure what Manatee Community Foundation is. The thing is, you need to know that some of the organizations have federal fiscal years, which start in October. So all of that is really important for you to know, because when you're submitting a grant, what you never want to put in there is wording that matches with your fiscal year. You needed to make it easy for them to understand what they're funding in their fiscal year. And again, you know, they're going to give you the timelines, the deadlines, and all of that when you need to be reporting. And in that case, if it's still not clear to you, just pick up the phone and ask, you know, call whoever the liaison is. But the truth is, you need to be able to report back on that project period. So some of them will say, we will fund, and this is a simple one, and it's not grant, it's sponsorships, but let's say the community foundations are funding your special events this year, and then you have to report back on if the event happened or didn't happen, how many people went and stuff. That's within their fiscal year. They need to know that before they go to their new fiscal year. It could be a pro for some organizations. I used to work at an organization who had a federal fiscal year. Their fiscal year started in October. So we were able to get funding from the same community foundation twice a year because they had a different fiscal year. So it's a matter of just knowing. And when you put in your timeline and your milestones, you're able to explain that. For whatever reason, if they gave you the money at the middle of the year, they're not going to fund things that happened in the past. So you're going to have to know that if you're asking for funding and your fiscal year starts in October, that you're giving them a program that's going to run from October to October. Or if they gave you the money in January, but your program starts in June, that you will be giving them a reporting back from June to June. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So is there a line in there for timeline? Alrighty. So I think that takes us into success metrics and evaluation plan. So in the timeline, you should definitely be able to identify what your milestones are. So for, Steve's about to take a, Nicole, what project do you have in mind or program do you have in mind for a grant right now?
Counseling.
Mental health counseling. So if you were just awarded, let's say $100,000 for that program that you have, what would be your metric for success for that particular program?
So after people complete the counseling process, they do a survey and we're able to ask them questions on if they met their therapeutic goals, what improved in their life, things like that, and we're able to use that in the grants.
Okay. So your metric would be survey self-reporting within a specific time frame after having completed whatever time amount of service it is. So those metrics are really important for you to have in your timeline, for you to have it as a milestone, for you to be able to say, this is how we're collecting that data. This is how we're going to know that we were successful. Keeping the doors open isn't a measurement of success when you're reporting on a grant. That's really important for you to know. I know that that's why we get up every day, because we want to serve our community. We want to make sure that people are better off because of us, because of the work we do. You need to be able to say, this is what we did in this time frame. This is our success rate based on X, Y, and Z, and this is how we collect that. This is how we know that.
So I've been using the state test, which is now called the FAST test. The grants seem to want something more airy-fairy, but keep in mind I'm an ER doc. My interests are you breathing? Are you bleeding? So do I ask the teachers, do you like your students better? I mean, what?
Well, it goes back to how you identified which students needed your help. You said that they were at a level.
Yeah, they're at the bottom of the pile of reading. That's why we get them.
So how do you measure how they progress?
FAST test.
Okay, but in addition, so it's just, that's the only measure you have to measure if the children are improving on their reading?
Yeah, sometimes we get the iReady or fluency test.
Okay, so those would be your metrics to be able to say.
I don't need any.
Oh, if the teachers like them or not, no, that's not your mission. Your mission is for the kids to learn how to read. I'm going through a great program right now and I have this really great coach assigned to me. And one of the other coaches said, my role here is to push you all so that you are a better version of yourself and that your business goes from here to here. You might love me, you might hate me, I don't care. If you went from here to here, you rolled your eyes at me, you never talk to me again, I do not care. I achieved my accomplishment. That's a coach with over 50 years of experience making millions and millions of dollars. So your teachers do not have to like the kids and the kids do not like to. It'd be nice if they liked each other. It'd be easier, but if they learned how to read, that's what you're going to report on.
Yeah,